40 gallons. That's what this lasts. 40 gallons. Then you throw it away and buy another one. Every 2 months, like clockwork. 6 cartridges a year, year after year, for the rest of your life. It's a cylinder of compressed carbon packed in a polypropylene shell. Took a factory to build, takes a landfill to bury. In 1829, an engineer in London built a filter out of sand. Just sand. It cleaned water from one of the most notoriously polluted rivers in Europe, and that same method is still in use today. One lasts 2 months, the other has been working for nearly 2 centuries. You call this progress?
Filtering water through sand isn't medieval. It's older than that. As early as 2000 BC in ancient India, people passed water through beds of sand and gravel before drinking it. The Egyptians figured out coagulation around 1500 BC. The Greeks used cloth filters. The Romans built zigzagging aqueducts that let water settle and aerate naturally. But the real breakthrough came from a bleachery in Scotland. In 1804, a man named John Gibb owned a bleaching factory in Paisley. Bleaching requires clean water, so it stands to reason that's what drove him. He installed an experimental sand filter, likely engineered by Robert Thom, a local engineer. Layers of gravel and sand, dirty river water poured in the top, clear water collected from the bottom. It worked so well that he started selling the excess clean water to the public. Horse-drawn carts delivered it to houses across the town. The first documented municipal water treatment in human history, built because a man just wanted cleaner cloth. Not a government program, not a research institute, a cloth bleacher who needed cleaner water. 25 years later, in 1829, an engineer named James Simpson built something bigger, a 1-acre sand filter bed for the Chelsea Waterworks Company in London. Layers of brick at the bottom, then coarse gravel, then fine gravel, then sand, about 1 meter deep in total. River water poured in the top, trickled down, and came out clear at the bottom. This was the first treated public water supply in the world. Every resident in the Chelsea district got filtered water, and it worked beautifully. Other water companies copied the design within years. By the 1850s, sand filtration was spreading across Britain. Then came the proof nobody expected. In 1852, Parliament had already passed the Metropolis Water Act, requiring water companies to filter their supply. But it was 2 years later, in 1854, that a physician named John Snow traced a cholera outbreak in Soho to a single contaminated water pump. His 1855 essay connected cholera directly to water quality, and the data supported what the filtration mandate had already begun to address. Areas with sand-filtered water showed dramatically fewer cholera cases. The science caught up to the engineering, and it confirmed what the sand had been doing all along. Not a theory, not a guess, epidemiological evidence that filtered water meant fewer dead. And the response wasn't a marketing campaign or a product launch, it was a law, because the data was undeniable. Now here's the part that matters, the part that separates sand filtration from every modern filter on the market. Sand doesn't just trap dirt, it grows a living skin. Within the first 10 to 20 days of operation, a biological layer forms on the surface of the sand. The Germans named it the Schmutzdecke, literally translates to dirt cover, but that name undersells what it actually is. The Schmutzdecke is a complex ecosystem: bacteria, fungi, protozoa, rotifers, algae, even tiny aquatic insect larvae. As the filter ages, larger organisms appear: snails, worms, bryozoa. These organisms don't just sit there, they hunt. Predatory bacteria consume the waterborne pathogens that flow through the filter. Protozoa devour smaller microbes. Research from the University of New Hampshire found a strong positive correlation between protystin abundance in the top half centimeter of sand and E. coli removal rates. The more hunters in the biofilm, the cleaner the water. The organisms also produce extracellular polymers, a sticky, slimy substance that traps contaminants the way a spider's web traps flies. Under electron microscopy, mature Schmutzdecke samples show dense extracellular matrices that immature filters simply don't have. Your Brita filter traps particles. This filter eats them. And it doesn't stop at the surface. Below the Schmutzdecke, a deeper biological zone extends into the sandbed. Different species of bacteria dominate at different depths, each producing specific effects. The organisms excrete substances that are actively toxic to intestinal bacteria and waterborne pathogens. Think about that for a moment. The filter doesn't just block disease, it creates a hostile environment that kills it. And the deeper you go, the more layers of defense the water passes through. Here are the three mechanisms working simultaneously. First, physical straining. The fine sand grains, typically 0.15 to 1 millimeter in diameter, create narrow pores between them. For the finest grains, those pores are only about 20 micrometers across, small enough to catch larger particles and suspended matter on contact. Second, biological predation. The microorganisms in the Schmutzdecke and the deeper sand layers actively consume pathogens. The slow flow rate, about 0.1 to 0.3 meters per hour, gives the biology enough time to work, enough contact time for predation, adsorption, and microbial warfare. Third, chemical and microbiological oxidation. The organisms break down organic contaminants into harmless byproducts. Dead matter rejuvenates live matter. Waste from one process fuels another deeper down. 3 defense systems: no electricity, no chemicals, no replacement cartridges. Just sand and time. I want you to consider a number. In 2024, the global water purifier market was valued at $45.7 billion. Let that sit for a moment. Projected to reach $88.8 billion by 2034. Now here's what that number really represents. 26% of that revenue comes from subscription-based services, periodic maintenance, cartridge replacement, filter swaps. That means roughly $12 billion a year comes from selling you the same product again and again and again. Meanwhile, a technology that runs on sand and biology that doesn't need replacement parts, doesn't need electricity, doesn't need chemicals, has been available since 1804. But you can't build a subscription model on something that doesn't break. Optimized for revenue, not resilience. Let me walk you through what modern filtration actually looks like. A standard pitcher filter, the kind millions of households rely on as their primary water treatment. You pour water in the top. Activated carbon and ion exchange resin remove chlorine, some lead, some taste issues. 40 gallons later, the carbon is saturated. Its adsorption capacity is spent. It can't hold any more contaminants. At that point, the filter isn't cleaning your water, it's just slowing it down. You pull out the old cartridge, drop in a new one, every 2 months. And that's just to handle taste and basic sediment. These pitcher filters aren't even rated to remove most bacteria or viruses. That's the entry level. Now move up to reverse osmosis, the gold standard of modern home filtration, a multi-stage system that forces water through a semi-permeable membrane at high pressure, removes up to 99% of contaminants. Sounds impressive until you look at the maintenance schedule. Sediment pre-filter, every 6 to 12 months. Carbon pre-filter, every 6 to 12 months. The RO membrane itself, every 2 to 3 years. Post-filter, every 12 months. Annual maintenance cost for a residential RO system, Industry estimates typically put it somewhere between $150 and $300, depending on water quality and usage. For commercial systems, that climbs to $2,000 to $10,000 per year. And if you skip a replacement, the membrane fouls. Bacteria colonize the system. The thing designed to clean your water starts contaminating it. A filter that becomes a threat if you forget to maintain it. Convenient. Now compare. The slow sand filter doesn't have cartridges. It doesn't have membranes. It doesn't have replacement parts. When the flow rate drops, because the Schmutzdecke has thickened, you scrape the top centimeter of sand, wash it, put it back, or just let the biological layer reset. The sand itself, it doesn't wear out. It doesn't exhaust. It doesn't degrade. The biology rebuilds in 10 to 20 days. Slow sand filter maintenance, periodic surface scraping. No chemicals, no electricity, no proprietary cartridges. Modern RO maintenance, multiple filter replacements per year, proprietary membranes, pressurized systems, electricity required. And the results? Slow sand filters remove 90 to 99% of bacteria and viruses. In studies comparing filters with and without a mature biological layer, E. coli removal jumped from around 35% to over 95%, meaning it's the biology doing the heavy lifting, not the sand itself. And when it comes to parasites like Giardia cysts and Cryptosporidium, research suggests slow sand filters can remove them completely, all through biological action. RO filters remove 99% of contaminants, but they require constant input, constant replacement, constant spending. One system feeds itself, the other feeds a revenue stream. So why did we move away from sand filtration? In the late 1800s, cities were exploding in size. London, New York, Berlin, populations doubling in decades. And slow sand filters have one limitation that mattered to industrial-era planners. They're slow. A slow sand filter processes water at a rate of 0.1 to 0.4 cubic meters per square meter per hour. That means you need large surface areas to serve large populations. London's slow sand filter beds cover 72 hectares. That's a lot of real estate. So beginning in the 1870s and accelerating through the 1890s, the rapid sand filter was introduced, borrowed from the papermaking industry. Higher flow rates, smaller footprint, but it needed chemicals, coagulants to pre-treat the water, chlorine to disinfect, energy to backwash. And once you introduce chemicals and machinery, you introduce maintenance, parts, consumables, revenue opportunities. Now, rapid sand filters do handle higher turbidity better. They take up less space. There are genuine advantages, but what's worth noticing is this. The rapid filter didn't replace slow sand because it produced cleaner water. It replaced it because it was faster. And faster meant more water through smaller infrastructure, which meant more customers per dollar of construction. Based on what we can see in the historical record, the shift was driven by capacity, not quality. And from rapid sand filters, the industry kept going. Activated carbon cartridges, reverse osmosis membranes, UV sterilization lamps, each generation more complex, each generation more dependent on replacement parts. Today, the residential water filtration parts and accessories market alone is worth $9.5 billion, growing at over 6% annually. That's not the filter market, that's the replacement parts market, the aftermarket, the consumables, the thing that keeps you coming back. You could look at that trajectory and conclude they improved filtration technology, and in some ways they did. But you could also look at it and see something else entirely. Every generation of filter became more dependent on consumables, more reliant on replacement, more profitable to maintain than to build. Draw your own conclusions on which improvement mattered more to the people selling them. Here's what nobody mentions. Thames Water, the largest water and wastewater provider in the United Kingdom, serves 15 million customers, and they still use slow sand filtration. Right now, today, the same fundamental approach that James Simpson pioneered in 1829, sand beds, gravity-fed, no chemicals, is purifying drinking water for over 8 million people in London and the Thames Valley. Not the same physical beds, obviously, but the same principle, the same biology, the same physics. They call it a natural and chemical-free process. It's the third stage in their four-stage treatment system: long-term storage, rapid sand filtration, then slow sand filtration, then disinfection. The slow sand stage is where the biology does its work. No chemicals added, no cartridges swapped, just water flowing through sand at the rate gravity dictates. And the sand? They periodically replenish it with fresh material from specialist suppliers, high silica sand, over 90% purity. The beds are scraped, resanded, and maintained over the years, but the core method, gravity, biology, patience, hasn't needed reinventing. They're not using this because they're nostalgic. They're using it because it remains, in their own words, a vital part of modern water treatment. Not a museum piece, not a relic, the backbone of one of the largest water systems in Europe. And they're currently investing in robotic underwater cleaning systems to make their slow sand filters even more efficient, not to replace the technology, but to keep it running without draining the beds. A £2 million research project funded by the water regulator, built around a method from the 1800s. That tells you something about how well it works. The first slow sand filter in the United States was built in 1872 in Poughkeepsie, New York. It operated continuously until 1959, 87 years, on sand. Find me a Brita cartridge that lasts 87 years. 3 things. 1. Look into biosand filters. Organizations like COST in Calgary, Canada, have distributed concrete and plastic biosand filter designs to over 450 organizations in 55 countries. These are household-scale slow sand filters. You can build one. They work. 2. If you use a modern filter, understand the business model. Know what you're paying for replacement cartridges versus what you're paying for actual filtration. 26% of the industry's revenue comes from selling you the same thing repeatedly. Know the game. 3. Question the assumption that newer means better. The largest water treatment provider in the United Kingdom still relies on a method from 1829, the Schmutzdecke, a self-regenerating biological filter that runs on gravity and time, outperforms any cartridge that needs swapping every 60 days. Not every problem needs a subscription. Some problems were solved with sand. 4,000 years ago, someone in India poured river water through sand and gravel. The water came out clear. Today, a $45 billion industry will sell you a plastic cylinder to do the same thing. Worse, actually, because your cylinder stops working in 60 days. Sand doesn't stop working. It builds a living armor, a biological defense system that gets stronger over time. Bacteria, protozoa, fungi, an entire ecosystem that nature assembles on its own, without instruction, without engineering, without a subscription fee. An ecosystem designed to eat the things that make you sick. And here's what should stay with you. Nobody had to invent the Schmutzdecke. Nobody had to engineer it, or patent it, or sell it. They just had to pour water through sand and wait. The biology showed up on its own. It always does. No electricity, no chemicals, no subscription. Just physics and patience. Old ways aren't magic. They're physics. Your filter needs replacing every 2 months. This method has been purifying water for nearly 200 years. Time is an ingredient.